Hey folks, Evil DM here. Got another episode of Parsecs and Papers, or Papers and Parsecs, I should say. I did it backwards that one time. Star Wars, the role-playing game, first edition rules. Going over it to, accompany everything that's going on with my channel and the first edition Star Wars game that we have running at RollHigherDie.com. Having lots of fun doing that, and I know some people asked for some more for this, so there's more coming your way. So what we're doing now is we're going to be talking about believe this was in the comments by a couple people. That stands out was BigG, I believe his name was, that wanted to know about Droid characters as player characters itself. Now, if you flip to the original book on page 84, that does have character rules for playing droids. Now, you have to, before you start things off, you're going to want to say, do you really want to play a droid? Because they're very limited in what they can do. And you have to build a droid if you want to do anything other than just be a secondary character. You have to build it a certain way because certain droids cannot attack or harm humans unless they have a certain programming in there. So they have to have the, I believe it's called the battle software or things like that. It goes over that in the rules, but we're going to go over it real quick how this works. Now, there's two methods to this. I'm going to show you the first edition role-playing game method that's listed in the core book itself. Now, if you don't have any other book, that's fine. You can use these listed here. And then I'm going to go over the one that is listed in the Star Wars Rules Companion, which came out a little bit later. It kind of updated the rules from 1E, which I want to call 1.5E, right before they moved into the second edition book, the blue one with Darth Vader on the cover, which I did play for multiple amount of years as well. But overall, we really did like first edition better. I never really got into the revised and updated. Revised and expanded. Revised and updated is the new group project. But the revised and expanded, we never got into that because that's where my Star Wars kind of role-playing career stopped at the point when I was in the 90s. We kind of stopped there at second edition. Then we went back to first for a little while. Then I stopped playing altogether for a while. And then when I started picking it back up in the late, like 06, 07, around there, I started again with first edition, then bounced around from first to second, mostly playing first. But this is where the rules were updated and expanded for first edition before they decided to just rehaul the entire system. So if you don't have this book, it's fine. I understand. Don't worry about it. You could just get the Re-Ups Project 1E Anniversary book. It's the first edition Anniversary Rules book that has the Rules Companion, plus it has the Source book, first edition Source book in there as well. But right now we're just going to go over these two things because this is where most of the information comes from. Now, as far as the core book goes, it basically tells you have 18 dice to distribute among your skills. Attributes are only one dice. So you distribute one dice to all of your attributes, and that's it. They sit right there at one dice. Now, you have 18 dice to distribute among 1, 2, or 3 skills. That's it. 1, 2, or 3 skills, and that's it. You can have one skill that has 18 dice in it, 2 skills that breaks it up to 9 and 9, 3 skills that roll 6s, but that's it. Unless the GM decides that, you can just distribute amongst the skills how you please. But if you look at most of the droids that they give you examples of, and here's 3PO right here, he doesn't really have many more skills in languages and cultures. R2, basically, computer programming repair and starship repair. If they have equipment, which we'll get into in just a second, but that's where it gets into a little bit more of, you want this, you got to spend a die for it. So, for example, you want a blaster pistol, which only can be done by war and security droids only. They have to have that whole unit programmed into them. So you would spend a dice for that. So you'd have to actually take the blaster skill itself to have it, to actually have a blaster implemented inside your R2 unit or 3PO unit. But before I jump ahead, the first thing you want to decide is what is the droid's function and what type of droid you want to play. That's where it's gonna be up to you and your GM to sit down. This is not an easy, quick 1, 2, 3 process. And my suggestion is to go to Wikipedia look up Droid, and it has all the definition and classes of droids here, as you can see. Just get my face out of the way here so you can see it better. And as you can see, there's various different class 1, class 2, and you can look through this and decide which one you want to base it off of. Assassin droids, things like that. Once you find that, say for example, an assassin droid, it'll go into the history of it and what type of equipment it has and where you can find sources of it from. Once you narrow down what you want to play as far as a droid, then you could start building it and putting in, as it says, the equipment. 1 dice per equipment. Tools, things like that. Normally, what you normally get is you weigh around about 110 pounds or 50 kilograms, depending on what country thing you want to use. You have 2 arms with graspers on it. That doesn't mean you have an actual hand. It's a grasper, like, R2's little grasper. And you can move that, and you move the same as a human, 5 meters with no penalty, 10 meters at top speed. Depending on if you actually use that or you don't use that, is really up to you. Now, if you want to increase that along with adding equipment and things like that, you can do it at a cost of 1 die. If you want to move faster than 5 meters standard, like you want to move 10 meters standard, but 15 at top speed, or the 20 at top speed because you're 20 at top speed because you're doubling it, you'd have to spend the extra dice. You can also weigh more, or weigh less. Yeah, it does cost more to weigh less. You can, actually, basic movements and fewer limbs also get you an extra dice backwards. I apologize, I read that wrong. I don't really play droids because I don't see the purpose of playing them, which I don't care if a player wants to play them. That's their prerogative. I just never saw the appeal in my book to play it. Alien races, hell yeah, but droids, and why? But everybody to each their own. Now, you can learn new skills as a droid, but it is not cheap because a new skill point that's a +1 pip is 1,000 credits, which gives you, and 10 skill points, which gives you just the +1 on that new skill that you want. And the reason why is because you're a droid, so everything you do has to be programmed or upgraded. So the cost is going into upgrading the software and maybe putting new parts, attaching to you, things like that. Now, with that said, there are some questions left open for improving because it doesn't actually have anything here about increasing your attributes at all. I would assume that, you would just do it normally with character points. It's really up to the GM. I mean, I would think personally, if you want to increase attributes or skills that you already have, you can use character points like normal. But for instance, if you're going from like a 2 to a 3, which is a whole new dice, I would probably rule it that you would have to get a equipment upgrade, or you'd have to have parts replaced, so you'd have to pay for it that way. That makes more logical sense to me because droids don't really grow on their own. They can learn based on programming, but they don't act like humans and aliens, and they have the ability to just naturally grow in time. So there has to be a reason, and I'm not the type of person that's just like, meh, you increase. No, I like to have reasons behind it. If you get an extra dice, you get an extra force power, for example, I like to have a reason behind you getting those things, like a little bit of a story. Some reason. It doesn't have to be elaborate sometimes, just a reason. And with that said, force powers, droids absolutely cannot have force powers. Nope, they're not allowed because they're not a human life form. So they can't use the force. They're not living, they're not really breathing, so they can't use it. Which is what goes along with the whole Star Wars canon. The more mechanical or cybernetic you become, the less in tune or attached to the force you become. So it makes sense. All right, so that is how you do it as far as the first edition book itself. There's a lot of things that are left open that you and the GM have to consider, so sit down with him or her and figure out how you want to do it and how you want to do it going forward. Have it nailed down on a piece of paper or whatever, written on a Word document, however you guys do it, just so you know going forward in the future, there's no questions whatsoever. That's my advice for that. Now let's take a look at the Star Wars Rules Companion, which if you flip to, I believe it's page 28, which has new rules, droids, right here. So this is a little bit different take on how they do it. Now, other than, going to here and finding your droid, which you want to be, blah, 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 naming it whatever the name you want to be. Of course, still can't use force powers in this whatsoever. But with this, you still have 1D in all your attributes, just like you were before. But you receive 65 dice to distribute among everything. But the catch is that it costs more for certain things that you want to increase. Now, if you want to increase one of your attribute die, it costs 5 dice per 1 dice increased during the initial phase. Now, they also added another rule into this 1.5, which matches up with 2, was instead of you automatically moving per meters, there was a dice roll that you had to make to see what you can do and how far you can go and if you can move out of the way of things. I didn't really use those rules. We mostly stuck to the 1E movement rules and how many actions you could take as well. But you can, if your GM wants to play with those rules, it's all in this little book right here, how to use that, which are called speed codes, which you have to actually adjust. But say you don't bother with that, that's also, I would probably minus some dice off if you don't bother with the dexterity codes. That way it's a little bit more fair. But again, it's up to you and your group. Again, it's the same thing. After that basic change, everything is a die per what you want to do. And you could distribute it wherever the heck you want to distribute it. Again, no force skills. But you can't go higher than 13 dice in any skill whatsoever. That's the only if and or but. But it's pretty much the same procedure. You just get more dice, a little more freedom. They give you a little bit more, leeway to do whatever you want. And you can actually, they give you rules how to update your attributes other than just stuck with 1D until you and the GM figure out how you want to do it, unless you want to go by the regular rules. Do you need to cost money for it? I mean, I would think if you're increasing attribute dice, you would have to have some type of upgrade, whether it be software, equipment, something. Droids, have to have a reason for having increased improvement in their lifespan, so to speak. They don't grow and increase like humanoids do. They can't because they're not living. So I can my character can get stronger by repeatedly doing actions over and over. A droid cannot get stronger over time. They can only do what they can only do unless they get their parts upgraded and their software changed to accommodate that upgraded equipment. So hopefully this made a little sense for those people that want to play it. I've given you the 2 sources out there that you can look at. Again, you can have the first edition book. You can go to the re-up first edition anniversary book, or you can grab the Rules Companion book, which looks just like that. Kind of a hard thing to find, but if you do, excellent, good price. It's a good book to have around. If you're playing first edition, if you're not, don't bother. Just get the re-up book. Go for the second edition. A lot of these things are in the revised and second edition. So unless you're just like hardcore, like how we're doing in our group, just playing 1E and nothing else, then, you're fine. Other than that, tell me what you think. Tell me what you want to see next in the series. I was thinking about doing alien species. There's not much on that, but there are some little tips and things that you can do to making characters that are other than humans, which the game assumes that everybody's going to play as basically default human, unless you're using a template. But there are some rules for that. We'll get into that the next episode. So keep it original, keep it old school, and good night, everybody.